Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, starring Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Justice Smith, Sophia Lillis, and Hugh Grant. Now when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, there are certainly a lot of fantasy series that have been based off of it over the years, but when it comes to actual film adaptations, the one that most people would be aware of is the one that was made infamous by being a generally bad adaptation of the games and a pretty lackluster comedy at that, with one of its only saving graces being a very over-the-top Jeremy Irons. But Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves ends up being a very good-spirited comedy, with most jokes that don't fall flat, and a solid emotional core while it's at it. Let's get to the story, shall we? The story follows a bard, played by Chris Pine, who had an adventuring party with a bunch of different people, but he was betrayed by a red wizard lady. So, after he finds out that one of his other comrades ended up forsaking everything out of being a con man, just so he could end up becoming the lord of a nation, he decides that he's got to take revenge on the guy in order to get a special tablet that could bring back his beloved. And alongside the bard's adventure, we have a warrior, played by Michelle Rodriguez. We have a spellcaster who's not exactly great at his job, played by Justice Smith, and we have a druid, played by Sophia Lillis. And they all have to use their skills in order to pull off one of the biggest heists you can think of in this setting. Now, if you've ever seen The Legend of Vox Machina, you'll definitely understand where a lot of the comedy comes from. It uses the fantasy setting and a lot of the character types to basically go through a funny little heist film. Chris Pine gets a lot of good songs, and he has a lot of jokes at his expense, but he also happens to have generally good plans that end up saving the day. Michelle Rodriguez is the badass, as we've seen her in a lot of her films ever since the Fast and Furious franchise. Justice Smith doesn't have a lot of self-confidence, but he does help out when the situation does call for it. And Sophia Lillis' druid can turn into freaking animals, which honestly makes her my favorite character, considering that a lot of the good effects of the film do come across when it comes to her various animal transformations. From snakes to deer to owl bears to any other animal you can think of in the D&D universe, she can turn into that animal, and she probably will at one point or another. Also, Hugh Grant's villainous Forge is a general delight, considering that he's very over the top in the role, and he kind of reminds me of Jeremy Irons when it comes to his performance. However, I will say the opening 15 or 20 minutes does make it feel like this takes a while to get to where the film gets really fun, as it has to go over our main character's backstory in a way that just feels like the boring stages of a D&D campaign. You know, where you're filling out a character card, telling everyone your backstory, and you just sort of want to get to the game. And yeah, it does feel like it has those setup problems that made me think that the movie was going to be more boring than it should be. But when the action does get underway and when the characters do meet up with each other, that's when a lot of the fun of the film happens, and it just keeps building and building until we get an epic climax at the end. With some effects that hold up, others that don't, but generally keeping the film creative and fun, especially when it comes to the magical abilities and when it comes to the cast chemistry. It's not exactly going to be a classic in the making, but it's a much better representation of D&D than the old film. And I would consider it like a PG-13 Vox Machina. If that sounds like it's up your alley, then I think you'll definitely enjoy it. I'm going to give Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves an 8 out of 10. See you next time.